One day when my daughter was 5, she called out to me from the sofa across the room to announce a very important message. "Mom," she said, "I'm touching you right now." For emphasis, she had her hands behind her back and she went on to cite her evidence. "My butt is touching the sofa legs are touching the floor is touching your chair legs, and the chair is touching your butt. See, I'm touching you right now. Do you feel it?" If you take this idea and expand it beyond the hardwood floor of my living room, you might begin to imagine that the ground we share connects us all. In fact, this is like a kindergarten version of the same claim that the physicist Stephen Hawking made when he wrote with great urgency just before he died, "The greatest revelation of the space age is the image it's given humanity of ourselves." When we see the Earth from space, we see ourselves as a whole. We see the unity, not the divisions. It's a simple image with a compelling message: one planet, one human race. We're all touching each other. Like all great truths, there's a paradox in this message because while at some level we know in our bones that our lives and destinies are interconnected with the 7.7 billion other humans whose chairs are in butts, grounded in the same world as ours, we haven't always managed to live fully out of that truth. So for the last several years, at a time of deepening division and polarization, I've been thinking about the possibility of art as a way to connect us all to the ground we share, to deepen our connections with each other across insurmountable divides, and to inspire a sense of possibility and a better future for all. My interest in this topic is personal and grounded in a place I love. I live in the Old Town neighborhood of Chicago, and I love Old Town. I'm a transplant there. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, and originally settled in the neighborhood just after college while I was working full-time in the Loop and attending grad school at the University of Chicago. There was something about this place that called out to me, and now this same ground that over the centuries has known the feet of indigenous nations, waves of immigrants, artists, folk singers, and Second City legends has become a true home to my family and me for over 2 decades. One of the things I love the most about Old Town is the diversity. In a neighborhood with one of the hottest real estate markets in the country, affordable housing has been structured into the neighborhood long-term, and almost a third of the residents live in subsidized housing. I view this diversity as a gift, but it's a gift that we haven't managed to open. Sedgwick Street, which is shown in this image in yellow, is a dividing line like few others in Chicago, where residents on opposite sides of this street, whose feet touch the same pavement every day, experience this space in vastly different ways. In January of 2013, the reality of this divide became more real to me. At the time, I was reading a book by a ceramics artist named Bill Strickland called Make the Impossible Possible. He grew up in a tough neighborhood in Pittsburgh, and his sense of the possibilities for his own life were limited by the weight of the hard realities he saw around himself. Until one day, his senior year of high school, he wandered into a ceramics classroom, and he got sucked in. He describes how, as he honed his craft, he would sometimes, out of nothing but mud and imagination, create something that was so beautiful and so worthwhile that it felt like a miracle. And he thought, if I can make this a miracle out of nothing but a ball of dirt, certainly there are more possibilities for my own life and for the world around me. That same month, as these ideas were sinking in, one evening, a tragedy struck my neighborhood. My husband had just left the house to walk to a meeting at church in our neighborhood, and my children and I were walking down the stairs on our way to the kitchen to get dinner ready when we heard gunshots outside our living room window. My son turned around and looked me in the eye and said, "Those are gunshots," and he started counting out loud. 6 gunshots, 2 young men were shot, and a young father lost his life. Tragedies like this had happened in my neighborhood before. It felt familiar, almost predictable, and unavoidable. It's easy to be tempted to limit our sense of possibility by the reality that exists around us. But my daughter's words came back to me, and I kept thinking that my feet touched the ground, that touched the pavement of a young father whose children would grow up without him. And I wanted to believe that there were more possibilities that we hadn't yet considered. The next day, when I walked home from school with my daughter, we walked past our house to the corner, where a growing collection of teddy bears, notes, and gifts was forming a memorial. My daughter wanted to be outside and be on the ground and to know that our neighborhood was still okay. We crossed Sedgwick Street and stood next to the crossing guard, Dorothy, who welcomed us. And as I stood there breathing in the sights and sounds of Sedgwick Street, I was struck with an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the time I still had. And the world around me seemed both heartbreaking and beautiful. I looked down Sedgwick Street and I wondered, what could we do with a little mud and imagination in this place? That's when an unshakable vision for what is now Art on Sedgwick struck me. There were empty storefronts in the Marshall Field Garden apartments, and I couldn't stop imagining them as a welcoming place where neighbors from different worlds could begin to connect, create, and imagine new possibilities together. Now, I'm not an artist. I was a commercial banker for 16 years. And at first, I was mad at all the artists of the world who were missing from my neighborhood when we so clearly needed them. I would ask, why doesn't someone come and start an art center in our neighborhood? And then I heard a little voice say, "You're someone." So I began slowly to share this idea with a few close friends and then with a wider circle of community members. And people began to gather around this vision and to hold it with me. Architecture for Humanity of Chicago agreed to provide a service grant to design the space. And part of that process included offering a community charrette where diverse neighbors were welcome to come and share their ideas and their hopes and dreams for what a community center might mean for our neighborhood. So together, as a neighborhood, we began to name out loud some of the values that we hold dear and that we wanted to remember as we moved forward with this project. We all acknowledge that there are voices in our society that try to convince us that some people's lives are more valuable than others, and that some people's gifts are more important to offer than others. We rejected those voices. And we somehow knew that art was a part of claiming our true identity as human beings and as co-creators of this space we share. Someone at the meeting said that creation is the opposite of destruction. And we talked about how when we create something, that process of imagining something and then bringing it to life helps us connect with the best part of who we are as human beings and activates our gifts to offer to others. So we began to imagine what this could mean on a community-wide level where everyone was engaged and more people were connecting with that creative part of themselves and activating their gifts. So we created a leadership team and we got to work. This storefront, which had been vacant for well over a decade, became a vibrant community art space, a hub where neighbors of all kinds were welcome to come and create together. Neglected spaces on Sedgwick Street that most people avoided became fun gathering spots where neighbors would come and share their hopes and dreams. We also brought artists into the community, and through partnerships with local schools, the artists worked alongside the students to co-create works. And we exhibited them in art shows and in public places so that students became agents of their own representation in the neighborhood. The artworks sparked reflection and dialogue, and they reminded us all of the beauty all around us, in ourselves and in our neighbors. One of my favorite projects involved 3 schools and over 80 children and adults, grouped together in pairs as strangers. Part of this project involved bringing together 2 6th grade classes from very different worlds. One class was from the neighborhood elementary school, which serves only residents of affordable housing, and the other 6th grade class was from the private school a block away. This photograph shows the moment that these student pairs met each other for the first time. It was a very tense moment. All the participant pairs agreed to ask and answer a series of personal questions of each other. Things like, what do you dream about? What's your favorite memory? Do you think about death? And are you afraid? What does your future hold? The artist then asked the pairs to consider each other and what they'd learned about each other, and to create portrait photographs, and then compiled the images and the interview text, and gathered all the materials that were needed to create sculptures in the form of kites. The pairs were then invited to create the kites together, and then to perform the flying of the kites. On a drizzly afternoon in May, we all gathered together on a grassy field at Franklin Fine Arts Center, one of the schools that was participating. The artist, Cecil McDonald Jr., was positioned on the roof to take a photograph from overhead. And as we gathered together, one of the 6th grade students was overheard saying, "Get closer together, we are one." And once Cecil got the photograph, he shouted, "Go." And everyone took off to fly their kites. It was a beautiful image of a diverse community holding and elevating the lives and dreams of their neighbors. In the words of the artist, Cecil McDonald Jr., this photograph represents a social construction and activates the social contract that we make with one another as members of a society when we take the full measure of our sisters and brothers and celebrate our difference and our similarities. Imagine for a moment what kind of world we could create if we fully lived out of the truth and beauty of this image. Life is short for all of us on this planet we share. And every time one of us connects with our true creative core and offers our gifts to the world, our planet becomes a little closer to its true potential. And if the weight of the whole planet's true potential feels a little too heavy for you, well, I have a suggestion. What if we were all to start at the ground at our own feet and look around and consider our neighbors and the world around us with the eyes of an artist, and to ask each other and ourselves, what could we do with a little mud and imagination here? Perhaps together we could create communities across the globe that are so beautiful and so worthwhile that they will feel like a miracle. That's what art can teach us. Miracles are possible. Together, we can make them with our hands. Thank you.